brain. Welcome into his frequency. Enter at your own risk. Come be at peace with me. Ask the Paul, where we rise and don't fall.
Welcome back to another episode of Baxter's Buzz. I am your host, Baxter E. Hall. Welcome to my brain. Welcome to my frequency. Enter at your own risk. Today, I have a special guest, a returning guest to Baxter's Buzz. She is the president and chief strategist of Exodus Consulting, where they do leadership advisory and coaching, strategic initiatives, and DE&I. Sandy Harvey, welcome back. Good to see you.
Thank you. Good to see you. Good to be back. Super excited.
Yeah. We chat on occasion, frequently, and thank you for always keeping me kind of grounded, keeping me kind of focused on the right things, and just your um, mentorship and friendship has been like has been an awesome thing, and I'm grateful. So thank you for sharing some of our conversations on camera today.
Well, I appreciate it, and it is my pleasure. I definitely am honored to be here with you. Always super excited to talk to you, and you bring such a wealth of knowledge and insight. So I'm always like looking forward to what we're talking about
Oh,
next.
yeah, that's right. Exactly. I think you carry, the you do the heavy lifting on that part. But last time we kind of chatted, and one of the things we wanted to make sure we talked about on the podcast was this changing in these corporate structures around the role of DE&I. I mean, we had the murder of George Floyd. We saw a more intentional um sort of intentionality around DE&I, kind of what that meant, and like people were able to sort of get a better idea, maybe the Black experience and all of the marginalized communities, but especially like the Black experience, and then there was like a wave of DE&I
Mhm.
um, officers and managers and directors and all that. And then we've seen a lot of those folks kind of lose their roles, those roles being eliminated almost as quickly as they came. My first question is, what did people get right when they added these roles? And then what are some things that people could have done, a bit differently as well?
Yeah, no, it's really a good point. And right after the murder of George Floyd, you had um, just an outcry from employees that their leaders heard. And you had these CEOs and well-meaning organizations that wanted to do something around DNI, wanted to make sure this doesn't happen again. And so naturally, it's let's hire somebody to do this for us. Not thinking about the organizational culture, not talking about, I mean, the biggest struggle as I'm working with organizations and I'm talking to these CEOs or C suite. And I said, how do you hold leaders accountable? And I
Mm,
get like the air is sucked out of the room because they're like, well, what do you mean accountability? I'm like, we're talking about diversity, equity, and inclusion. How do you intend to hold leaders accountable for
mm,
the efforts that you're doing? And so, the chief diversity officers, sometimes they were hired with no budget, with no authority. Now,
mm,
they have chief in the name, but that doesn't mean, chief diversity officer doesn't necessarily mean that um, it came with authority. And then there's also, what I've seen is that there's nothing internally from a cultural perspective that even lend itself for people to be kind and compassionate to one another.
mm,
And that doesn't have anything to do with color. That's just I'm gonna treat you right, Baxter, because I'm gonna be respectful to you. We expect integrity and ethics. And so some of the organizations just lacked budget. They did not know how to do this work. And thought hiring a person was going to make everything better and different. And that didn't happen. And unfortunately, in some cases, especially as what we're seeing in the economy, is companies that were doing DE&I work are not no longer doing it. And some are not replacing their chief diversity officer positions. And so it's almost we're back to square one as it relates
Yeah.
to doing this work.
And so what you're saying without, I mean, you didn't say, but it's a cultural piece, right?
Mhm.
You can't send or bring one person into an organization and tell them to fix your culture,
So,
especially, and I'm not saying this is everyone because I know it wasn't, but there were a number, especially when leadership aren't really truly bought in to
mhm,
this notion. They are doing it because it appeared to be the right thing to do. Sometimes we have great plans and our intentions are good, but we don't have the infrastructure in
right,
place. And you talked about how do we hold these leaders accountable in the org, and what are we aiming for? Are we aiming to say we have a role for this person, or are we aiming to really change um, our culture inside that org?
right. And so that to me is it's interesting because when I think about the murder of George Floyd, most of us would say, "Oh, I would never do anything like that. I wouldn't do that." But we have so many broken systems in organizations that we're doing essentially that.
Hmm.
We tap people on the shoulder, but don't post positions. We have, leadership, development opportunities, but they're not for people of color. Or, I've experienced it in my own career where someone says, "Oh, you just need a little bit more training." I'm like, training for what? I've got 3 degrees. What other, I've got 20 years experience. What additional training do you suggest? Oh, well, just go to through this, but going through that doesn't necessarily mean I'm in the right place. So we have systems and organizations that be, because of how we do the work, and this diversity work is that we have to be better at welcoming people in, that don't look like us, don't act like us, don't think like us. And that's the hardest part because I naturally am going to promote somebody that acts and thinks like me.
Sure, sure. There are very few of us that really welcome a different perspective. It's hard talking
Yes.
to somebody that don't think like you, especially, if that's not what you want to hear.
Right.
There's plenty of people that we could find that will agree and see things the way that we see things, but I would argue that we are missing out on some real perspective. And you know, they say that you're only as good as the last time you changed your mind, right?
Mhm.
And so if we're not challenging ourselves, challenging our thinking, we're leaving a lot of opportunity to grow on the table.
Right. Absolutely. And, that diversity of thought is where, many organizations are still working to get to. And you have pockets of inclusion in an organization on this team, on that team, but organizations overall struggle with how to be inclusive and what does that look like? Succession planning. Well, why is it a secret in the organization about succession planning? Who's the next successors? Like, oh, we're not going to tell anybody. I'm like, well, why? You lack transparency. People don't trust. And that's what we find in organizations we work with is that there's a level of trust. The level of trust could be higher. And so when people don't trust you, guess what? They're like, well, I'm just going to leave because I'm not sure about this organization.
Yeah. Talk about where folks have the biggest opportunity to improve around just inclusion and equity
Mhm.
specifically.
Yeah. For me in organizations, different companies that I talk to, and even when I share, you have people, diverse people in the organization. Let them share their story. I find that that is, you don't need to hire a consultant. You know, you can hire a facilitator to help people with sharing their story. But this is like you have great people in your organization. Baxter, tell me your story. Tell me how, what is Baxter thinking? How did Baxter get to where Baxter is now? So just listening, I was working with one organization, and one of the vice presidents was a Black male, and the CEO was facilitating this section, and this Black male was actually sharing with the entire organization. This was on Zoom, about what it felt like to drive while Black.
Mm,
Now, he shared it in a way that, shared the experience about, him laying on the ground, face down, gun to the back of his head, handcuffed. And the CEO was so captivated by that story. He shared his truth. And oftentimes in organizations, there's a lot of people walking around with truth and nobody's listening to them. Nobody, we don't want to talk
mm,
about it. We want to talk about, yeah, the gender differences or generational differences, but there people are experiencing things that gave that particular VP a different perspective of life experience, and sharing that with the entire organization. People were, he said he had people coming up to him and just, really really embracing him and saying, I never had to have a conversation with my kids around what to do if you get pulled over by the cop. Put your hands on the wheel. Nobody, you have to think about that. And so people really appreciate it. But I'm saying if we can share more stories, I think that would give us an insight into what folks are actually dealing with and what they're coming to work with.
you, you got me just kind of buzzing all over the place because I think about any large organization that I've been a part of that's, had these consultants come in. Doesn't have to be diversity work, just general consult. Most of the time, we was telling them all this stuff that this consultant told them eventually, and they're like, "We've done
Mm-hmm.
this and we've worked with this and we've spent a lot of time." We told y'all,
Mm-hmm.
you know, the facilitation piece, allowing the team members to share their experiences on a platform to add perspective, to to garner ideas. That's a huge part of it, and that's the inclusion piece, right?
Yes. Yep. That's
Wow.
that's 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 the work that, and I tell people, I'm like, I can build a strategy. Yeah, our organization builds the DEI strategy. We can do that, but you still got people that need to connect with other people.
Hmm.
Now that's the part, that's the hard work that has to be done. So I'm like, do it up front. Start letting people share their story of what it means, you know, to be an LGBTQ plus, be in that community. What does that mean? I've heard one person tell me, they said at the age of 4, I knew, felt like I was in the wrong body. That's not my perspective. That's somebody else's perspective. Why not allow people to share the story of what they experience and how they feel marginalized in the workplace and what we can do to help overcome some of those things? We don't have to understand it, but it helps. The perspective, as you mentioned, is what really helps.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, and when you talk about, driving while black and some of the things that um I've experienced, I won't speak for you, just dealing in, being in these corporate settings for so long. Um, and you get to work and you kind of leave all that stuff there,
Mhm.
right? Nobody else is, I think about I think about things like somebody's driving behind me and they're like kind of on my tail, and I'm thinking, hey man, this is such and such. I won't say any cities. This is such and such city. I'm
Mm,
not speeding. You may feel
right.
more comfortable speeding, and you go on ahead around me. It's these things that many of us navigate
Right.
subconsciously.
Right.
It's a lot of pressure to your point, and then I'm trying to get to this job and then leave all that behind and show up in a certain way and not bring my entire self to
Yep.
and then something happens that triggers something that and then people are looking at maybe me like something wrong with me,
Hmm.
right? Because they don't have the perspective. They don't have the
Hmm.
perspective. But if we were in um if we had some sort of physical ailment that was noticeable
Right.
and everybody wanted to, if I was walking around and I had a limp or a cast and people want to do the hokey pokey, they'd
Hmm.
say back maybe you want to sit out, or hey, maybe we could figure out a different hokey pokey or whatever, right? It's like I'm being silly, but I'm being like serious. Like we've had to sort of shut everything down, walk into these spaces, and so much of who we are was connected to these experiences outside of our 9 to 5.
Right. Absolutely. And that's where, this Gen Zs, even some millennials, that's where they're demanding, I am who I am, and I need to bring all of me to work if you want the best out of me. And leaders I know are struggling with, well, I don't want that part of them. I just want them to do the work. But you can't separate who someone is from the work that they do. And then, I know in my experience, I've had leaders that they wanted me to do the work, but they wanted me to do the work how they did the work. And I'm like, but that's where I'm struggling, is because I need to do the work. I can get the work done. I can get the same output or better. I just need to do the work like I do the work, not
Yeah.
like how you want me to do the
Hmm.
work. And it's not wrong because I didn't do it the way you want me to do it. And so, in thinking about even how we're treating these generational 5 generations of the workplace, how we're treating people, we have to understand. I had one leader tell me that's like, well, I keep calling the team member, and they call me at HR, and like, I'm like, okay, did you try texting them? Well, no, I want them to pick up the phone and talk to me. I'm like, well, there's a different way. If you really want somebody to talk to you, just try texting. They'll respond. You know,
Yeah.
they responded to me.
It's really the simple concept of meeting people where they are. And if you have to meet, physically meet them halfway, if you have to, text, get out of your comfort zone to get into their world, that you don't know how much that would mean to them.
Yeah, it's to meet them where they are. And then one of the things that I use in training is talking about the platinum rule, is to treat others as they want to be treated. We grew up, or at least I did, on the golden rule: treat other people as you want to be treated. But realizing that we're all different, like, and I use this example and people understand, I don't like chocolate, but people give me chocolate for gifts all the time. I bring it home, give it to my husband. But if you don't know enough about me to know I don't like chocolate, then you're just thinking, well, I just keep giving her stuff, and she's satisfied. Well, I'm treating her, somebody's treating me as they want to be treated, not how I want to be treated, right?
Yes. You, I've heard you say it so many times, and I think about that, often. And I try to not correct people, but offer that perspective. Yeah, it's no, it's a very nice gesture to treat people the way you would want to be treated. But there's a level above that,
Yes.
and the empathy that we need to implore um, and apply so that we can again get in people's worlds. I think about that. So I'm working on this networking presentation, right? And one of the things that I'm talking about is like value, like making sure or doing your best to sort of offer value to someone. Here's the trick. How can I offer value to Sandy if I don't know what Sandy values, right? So Sandy don't like chocolate, okay? So that's not I may love chocolate. I may think the business that I'm in, or it's just the best thing since the internet. But if that's not a service or a business that Sandy is interested in or needs at this time, then that's not where I can offer her value. But if I don't ask
Right.
enough questions to understand that, then I am assuming, and I'm gonna be doing a lot of swinging and missing that way.
Mhm. And oftentimes leaders, and I feel for leaders now because they're overwhelmed. They're doing a lot of work. They're trying to lead, we've changed leadership structures of what organizations look like. So people are generally doing more with fewer people. Um, but if you just take, if somebody, I look at it as an investment. So if you invest 15 minutes in caring and concern for your team members, it will have exponential returns. But it's convincing people that if you take the time and demonstrate concern and compassion, like you generally care,
Mhm.
it which we're not doing this in the world around us, which is a whole nother, we'll have to talk on a whole nother one. But
Right.
we are now being influenced by the culture and coming in, and so we have to think about how can these organizations and companies actually do work to impact the communities around them. That's to me, where we want to be.
Yeah. Yeah. It starts internally, right? It starts at home. It starts inside the organization, and then I was on a call recently. Jim Kapnick was talking. It was like our monthly sort of just kind of update, and we talked about the keynote that we had at our event recently, and he shared some of the lessons and said we want these things to for you to apply these inside the organization, but also apply them the rest of your lives too. And I mean that's what we should be trying to accomplish is, hey, these lessons just don't work here. They work everywhere. They should, and that's how you connect with the person, and not the role per se. And when people feel seen, they tend to work a little harder for you, and they tend to have a better idea of how their work is connected to the work of the org, and it's not siloed out, right?
Yeah.
Um,
No, absolutely.
talk about so we've talked about this piece. Exodus Consulting is doing some really cool things as far as these like fractional diversity officer roles for for these organizations that maybe don't know where to start, and they know they need something, but they don't know exactly how to go about getting it. Talk about the work that you and your team are doing, going into these organizations and sort of offering that fractional diversity officer sort of perspective and like that lens to look
Yeah.
at the org through.
So we, realized a few years ago, we've always done the DNI strategy, and provide, consulting and advising, especially for C-suites, helping them really understand what doing this work is about. It's not, often had some of my C-suites really be like, oh my gosh, they didn't want to do the work because they didn't know the work. which you understand that. And so I have compassion around that. And I'm like, I'm not asking you to be an expert. I'm just asking you to be open. And once you say that, it has been very helpful. So we've gone in and helped organizations with um, diversity strategy, with really hearing, getting a pulse from what their team members are actually feeling. So we, do an inclusion assessment. We'll do the diversity strategy. We do training later. Training is not the first thing because it's not strategic and it doesn't last, especially if you don't have expectations around it. And so, really being able to support organizations without them going to um, hire a chief diversity officer as the first thing. Oftentimes, companies struggle when they hire a chief diversity officer from the outside. No one, really knows the organization or inside, but they don't have the authority, they don't have the budget. But we do it at a fraction of the cost. But really, our goal is to create inclusive environments and provide organizations with the tools to be able to do that. So build out their diversity council, how to start ERGs. We give playbooks on how to do all of this work. That usually one person can't do. And it's impossible and it's wrong. It is absolutely wrong in some companies what they expect the chief diversity officer to do. And as you said, is to change the culture. And I'm like, this one person can't do it.
Mhm. Mhm.
They cannot do it alone. And so our goal is, and I've been fortunate to have great clients to work with, these CEOs and HR professionals and leaders, being able to really talk to them and be transparent about this is only going to get you so far. And what do you do next? And we build out anywhere from a 24-month to a 36-month strategy. And it's been great.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, kudos to you. This is important work. Um, I I had a conversation. I had you in mind when I mentioned this. I was people asked me to share my experience, and I'm more than happy to share my experience, work wise or whatever. But when I'm asked to like talk about like DE and I per se, I think there's people more qualified, right? I could definitely speak from my experience or my vantage point, but we need to make sure that when we have these opportunities, that we take these opportunities serious, and that we're getting the right people in the room to have the
Absolutely.
right conversations.
Absolutely.
And you, the folks at Exodus, the what you all are building is a sort of a foundational like infrastructure that corporations can sort of build upon.
Mm,
And but it starts with the foundation. We can't
mm.
go in, my daughter came into my office and it's like one of these pillars like in the basement, and she said, this don't look good. Can we just I said, it's holding the house up, baby.
Right, right.
And she said, well, can't we just make it no, baby, it's kind of there for the
Yep.
structure, right? And we can't jump into the third floor
Right.
trying to do some things and we don't have that structure. And so kudos to you and your team for your vision, for your intentionality, and for your expertise in this space, because it's making each org better, but it's making the world better, but it's making the world better at a very deliberate sort of better each day type of sort of, you know, like mindset.
Yeah. My husband says one time he was preaching and he said, each one reach one. And so that's our philosophy is, we can touch one person and that, one person can touch another person. So when we share our experiences, just like you share your experiences and you inspire somebody, you don't always know that, but somebody's inspired by you. But the more we share our experiences, the more we have the opportunity to inspire and to engage others. And that's the work that we do at Exodus. We share our stories and we help organizations become comfortable with sharing their stories. It's like, okay, you're going to do this work, but now how are you involved in the community? Because anyone that does this work, if you're a company and organization and you do it internally only, and you're not focused with connecting with the community, means that there's still more work to do.
That's right. Well said. She is the president and chief strategist of Exodus Consulting Group. Um, Sandy Harvey. On behalf of Sandy, I just want to let everyone know who's watching this or listening to this that you are all capable. Don't discount the ripples that you're making and the waves that you are ultimately making in the lives that you are impacting. You are all capable. You just need to embrace your own frequency. So, on behalf of Sandy, I am Baxter E. And until next time, peace.
Welcome into his brain, welcome into his frequency. Enter at your own risk, come be at peace with me.
Thank you so much for watching this video. If you haven't already, please hit the like button, please subscribe, share, and also hit that notification button as well. Thank you so much.
Financial literacy to authentic black history, this real rap.